Okay, we are now live. So I'll open the meeting by asking for a request to propose a chair for this panel. So could I have a proposer? You happy to propose, Councillor Sherwood? Thank you, seconder. I'll second. Could I have a vote all in favour? Thank you very much. Over to you, Chair.
Thank you, Darius. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this Licensing Acts panel meeting. I'm Councillor Jo Robb, and I'll be chairing today's panel. Councillors Georgina Heritage and Kelly Hinton are joining me today. I have a few statements to make before we proceed with today's meeting. Please can everybody ensure that your mobile telephones and other devices are switched to silent during the meeting. In the event of a fire, the Democratic Services Officer, Darius, will lead all of us outside of the building where we should remain until we're directed to return. The meeting will resume once we've all returned to the meeting room and we're ready to continue. If you have a question to ask during the meeting, please may I ask you to raise your hand to alert me, and please do not speak unless you're invited to, and please do not interrupt any of the other speakers. For those who are joining remotely, and I don't think anyone is, please can you ensure your cameras are switched off and your microphones are muted? Thank you, Jeremy. Are there any other questions, or do you have any issues that require addressing now? No? Okay, thank you. Declarations of interest. Do any members of the panel have declarations of interest in respect of the items on today's agenda? No, I see none. Thank you. The procedure for today's meeting was included in your agenda pack. Could I ask if everybody has understood the procedure that we're going to be following? Does anyone have any questions about the procedure? No? Okay, thank you. At this point, I would like to take the opportunity to address the application made by the applicant regarding the representations from the Oxfordshire County Council Officer, Tom Cockhill. So I would like to invite the applicant to make your representations around that now, if that's okay.
So happy to do so. Our preliminary point is in relation to Mr. Cockhill's submissions, his representations. We have circulated a point of preliminary submission, which hopefully everybody has had sight of, which sets out basically how we got to the position we are in. If I can just address you on those points. Mr. Cockhill, as you've probably seen from reading through the report, has put in 3 representations: the Greyhound, the Red Lion and the Cross Keys. This submission is most pertinent in relation to the Cross Keys application, where he is the only person added to the report. But it also touches upon the other 2 in relation to the general content of his documentation that he's submitted. So firstly, dealing with the point of the Cross Keys. The Cross Keys is the last item in your agenda and has only attracted the representation of Mr. Cockhill. The first paragraph of his representation describes the location of the premises, and thereafter it's a carbon copy of what he's put in the other 2 representations. The main issue, though, before you to determine in relation to his representation is whether it should be before you at all today, and or whether this application should already be granted by way of tacit consent. And in relation to that, I'll take you through the submission. As you are aware, this is sort of a slightly complicated storyline in relation to the traders who are sat over there and Oak Taverns, in that because we have numerous traders, we've had to put in 11 applications, 1 for each trader. But the traders sit in 3 different locations. So sort of ignoring all that messy paperwork and just drilling really down onto this one point, and then we can come back to all the messy stuff later. Our position is this. The legislation that we're looking at is very clear. That comes from the 1982 Local Government Miscellaneous Provisions Act. That piece of legislation at Schedule 4 provides you with the power to do street trading licences. But in reality, that piece of legislation is more of a skeleton than a body. it's quite light on its information. And the information as to procedure and policy and how the application is implemented all comes from the policy, the joint policy, which you as councillors set, that goes to your committee, it goes to probably to cabinet for ratification, and that becomes your rule book in relation to applications for street trading consents in your area. So you've set a set of rules, and those rules are quite clear. So paragraph 5.5 of your policy, your rule book, very explicitly states all new street trading consent applications will be subject to a 28-day consultation. So you define the window for comment, and that's there absolutely clearly. 5.9 then goes on to say, if there are no valid objections, or the application can be amended or conditions set in agreement with all parties, a street trading consent can be issued. So it's tacit consent. Nobody has a problem. The licence, the consent is approved and granted. We don't need a hearing. We don't need any further communication. And that's reinforced at paragraph 519, where it states the head of legal and democratic may determine an application under delegated powers. So it doesn't have to come before you as a committee of councillors. It can be delegated down to your officers where there's no problems at all. And what we say is Mr. Cockhill's representation in relation to the cross keys came in late. It was after the 28-day period. It was out of time. And therefore, the application should have been granted at the end of the consultation period. You can't just hang on to see if something comes through the door a day later, a week later, a month later. What would the cut-off point be? Would it have been this morning at 9 o'clock? If you take that approach, you have no certainty, you have no clarity, and you go behind your own policy. Within the report, and the report is not your policy, the report is just a document prepared in anticipation of this hearing, there is reference to the possibility of allowing a dispensation, a discretion, to allow things to come before the panel today if it's late. And that dispensation tries to talk about evidence and representations. Now, I think you've got to use what we call a blue pencil in relation to that part of the report. It's not binding, it's not policy, but if you want to look at that part of the report, then there is a distinction between evidence coming in late with the permission of everyone, which is very common in licensing. That is what we do under the Licence Act 2003. With the consent of all parties on the day of a hearing, new evidence can be brought before the licensing subcommittee. But there's no actual provisions in your policy about that. And there's definitely no provisions in your policy regarding a late representation. So I think that the comments in the report, with the greatest respect, are a complete red herring, because they're trying to rewrite policy, and it is not the officer's job to write the policy. It is you, the members of the licensing committee's job, to write the policy and approve it. If you're not with me on the point of this being a late representation, and you think that this is a comment by Mr. Cockhill, then I think there you have to look at the content of his representation. We have submitted by way of evidence communications from numerous people in our bundle by way of evidence. In your report, it is not cited as evidence of anyone, and there is nobody to attach that evidence to, if you follow my logic, because there's no other objectors to the cross keys. So I think it's very hard to say it's evidence of an objector, because there are no other objectors. And I think it's quite hard to say it is a comment coming into the council because of its repetitious nature. And basically, it has just been used as a device to bring the matter before you. So I would, in relation to that, take you to the paragraph 17 onwards of the submission, the written submission, preliminary point, where we talk about how he has repeated on each of the documentation is submitted the same two paragraphs, and those paragraphs are generic, and repetitive and don't actually show any engagement as to the facts of each location at all.
Yeah.
So it's your question.
Well, I think it would be for the panel to decide that. You know, that's a matter of judgment. I think that the panel would need to determine for itself. Have you sort of covered most of the material that you want, most of the points that you wanted to make regarding this?
In relation to the preliminary point on the cross keys,
Yeah.
but the points as to repetition flow into the applications for the greyhound and the red line.
Okay, thank you for that. I think if it's okay, we'll go to Sam Fowles now. Sam, would you like to make some points so that the panel can hear them as well, please?
Yes, of course. Thank you. My name is Sam Fowles. I'm an independent barrister who's been instructed to advise the panel. To be very clear, I don't have any skin in the game. I'm just here to help get to the right legal conclusion, and I have no role in issues of fact or judgment. Might I just begin by exploring a few points with you from that? I think the first is your argument that the panel should effectively treat the policy, the paragraph 5.5 in particular, like a rule book, like a direction.
It's not a direction as in terms of a court direction, but it is the rule book, because the Licensing Act, the Local Government Act 1982 doesn't prescribe procedure. It delegates procedure down to each local authority to set their own way of processing trading consent applications. Therefore, if that policy has been determined, set by the councillors, ratified by the councillors, it does become their rule book. It becomes the steps to be undertaken.
Okay. Now, the reason I wanted to be clear about that what your case was, is because I want to give you an opportunity to answer a legal point, which is, are you familiar with, and no judgment if not, because I wasn't until I looked it up this morning, are you familiar with Laker Airways and the Department for Trade? This is a fettering case, is what I'm going to ask you about.
No.
So essentially what the court in that case says is that public bodies should not treat policies as a rule book, and should in fact be prepared to be guided by policies, but be prepared to depart from them if other public law duties, for example, tend in that direction. And so, of course, as you'll be aware, this panel has a number of public law duties which go beyond the mere duties set out in Schedule 4, and, for example, the duty to take into account all material considerations. So, having set that out, I'm not. Yeah. That's not my advice. No. I'm setting that out before you, so you have an opportunity to respond.
Yes. So I think on fettering and public duties, that is a valid point to raise. Say that their conscience has to be pricked. They have to have something to say, but there is a matter which they need to be considering. In this instance of the cross keys, there are no other objections. So no member of the public has considered that there is any other material information to be considered, nor any other consultee, say the police, etc., or any other council department. And therefore, looking at the weight of that argument, you've got to bear in mind the timing when the late representation came in, the fact that representations were made by Mr. Cockhill within time on 2 of the applications, and furthermore, the relevance of the comments he makes within his alleged representation. So fettering is a valid concern, but does it actually become triggered in this circumstance? It's a question of context. It's not an absolute. It has to be pricked. It has to be brought in to the conversation. And I would respectfully submit it is not. I think that a more pertinent case would be the case of misbehaving, which flows out of the Local Government Miscellaneous Act 1982, whereby a later representation was allowed in because it was considered to be already in the mind of those adjudicating and was of relevance. And that's in Lord Justice Hoffman's speech. And it very clearly sets out the word relevance. I looked at that because I thought, is there a way for councillors to allow this in under misbehaving? And my personal submission and my submission on behalf of my clients is that it does not, because again, the conscience is not pricked. There is not the material consideration. In that case, the council were desperate, Belfast Council were desperate to make sure that they could address matters arising out of a sexual events venue, entertainment venue. But the venue was in the public domain, the hearing was, and there were other representations which caused it to be in play. Whereas in this case, there is nothing else there, and the representation sought to be brought in is repetitious at best, a carbon copy at worst. You know, sort of there is nothing pertinent in that representation as to the application before the panel.
So is your case, it's not a material consideration?
Yeah,
Okay.
because he doesn't evidence. There is no evidence as to his comments. So he talks about indiscriminate parking and obstruction, but there is no evidence in relation to that. And then there's got to be a question of when do you close the door? You cannot have in good governance a situation whereby anybody can join the party at any time. That removes transparency, it removes credibility, it removes veracity of the process.
One more point to cover, just to, and on that, when we close the door, that's very helpful. This the late submission came in on the 8th of November. Does that sound about right?
I thought it was 24th on the email. But bear with. We may have different information.
You know, but what's important is when you got it. So that's let's be clear about that.
I think we got it when the my clients made inquiries in relation to what the position was, and it came in very late. You only knew about the press keys later on. So 15th of November is the date of the email from Mr. Cockhill to Charlie Fletcher, and I think my clients heard about it thereafter. And we're the 4th of December today.
Yeah, so you put your late your preliminary submissions in on the 28th of November. Yeah, so you must have heard of it before that.
So what's the date of the report?
That was last Tuesday.
17th. So the report's dated 17th.
Yeah, so if you got it on the 15th of November.
And it was, we probably found out about it in the report, to be honest.
Right, so you've had 1, 2, just over 2 weeks to with that report. Is your case that you're from a fair hearing perspective, are you saying you're materially disadvantaged from a fair hearing perspective?
I wouldn't run that argument. I would go to natural justice as a bigger concept.
Sure, but as a matter of, I'm asking as a matter of practicality in practice.
Here, you've got a written submission,
yeah.
And therefore, and my clients were able to secure legal representation.
Yeah. So if the panel was to decide against you on this point, would you be able to address the substance of Mr. Cockhill's submission?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. That's all of the things I need to clear up. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. I think that the panel might need to retire now to consider this submission now, to consider the application that you've just made. So if we could possibly take a few minutes, 15 or 20 minutes, if members of the public and others could leave the room now, Darius will take you out, and we'll convene privately to determine this initial decision, and then we'll proceed thereafter. them and we've considered them. We're aware as a panel and as a decision-making body that we may not fetter our discretion to policy, and that we must take into account all material considerations. The decision for us is that we are dealing with a material, or rather, that we consider this to be a material consideration, as it's a representation from an expert officer from the Highways Authority. And so we've decided that as Thomas Cockhill is an expert from OCC, this is material evidence. But given the arguments you've made today, the weight that we will give to that particular representation will be a matter for the panel to determine and to decide. So the weight will be, when we're considering the weight that we give to that representation, we'll very much take into account the arguments that you've made today. So thank you.
So on procedure, are we going to do cross keys next?
For the chair, I think
We're
it's a question of-
taking, I believe,
We go through the licensing officer's application, and then we'll go through the speakers.
so with those preliminaries out of the way, I'll now begin this item, application for street trading consents for the Greyhound Whitchurch, Red Line Chinner and the Cross Keys Wallingford. I'll now begin this item and I invite the licensing officer to present her report. Thank you, Ashley.
Thank you. Good morning. The application for the panel today, a street trading application submitted by Oak Taverns. These applications are to enable 11 traders to trade across a number of Oak Tavern sites across the South Oxfordshire district area. The sites that are being considered today are the Greyhound in Whitchurch on Thames, the Red Lion in Chinnell, and the Cross Keys in Wallingford. The application seeks to allow traders to serve hot and cold food between the hours of 12 midday to 9 p.m. 7 days a week. The applicant is Oak Taverns, who are represented today by Michelle Hazelwood from John Vaughan and Partners, who is accompanied by David Collinson and Simon Collinson from Oak Taverns. During the consultation period, the applications received a number of objections. These can be found in your report pack from page 25. We acknowledge that the objections from Highways have been accepted beyond the consultation deadline. However, the objections raised relevant concerns relating to the risk to public safety, for which we received legal advice that this information should not be withheld from the panel. Sorry. The attention of the panel is directed to 4.11 of the Council Street Trading Policy, which sets out that all applications for street trading consents must include written confirmation that planning permission must be granted for business or that planning permission is not required. Should the panel be minded to grant the consents today, all street trading consents applications before the panel would still be subject to obtaining planning permission. At this time, it is our understanding that planning permission has not been applied for. There has also been a number of supporting representations which were attached in your report pack as the additional supplement. The attention of all is also directed to the Council Street Trading Policy, which sets out how the council will deal with the applications and the relevant parts of the Local Government Miscellaneous Provisions Act 1982, which regulates street trading. The panel is requested to consider the applications and decide whether to grant the consents as applied for, grant the consents after modifying any conditions to such extent as the authority considers appropriate, or reject the applications or reject the applications. I have nothing further to add at this stage.
Thank you, Ashley. I now invite panel members to ask any questions they may have of the licensing officer.
No, thank you. I have none.
Okay, thank you. Does the applicant have any questions for the officer?
No.
Okay, thank you. Does any attending party have any questions for the officer? No? So if there are no further questions, I will now invite the applicant to present their case. Thank you.
Thank you. How do you want me to proceed? Do you want me to sort of give a bit of an overview and then drill down to the three?
Yeah. I
Um,
think that's the
right.
yeah. And you have 15 minutes, but given the complexity and given that we're talking about 3 separate sites with 11 bands, I'll be lenient. But if you could try and,
I think the first one will be quite chunky,
Yeah.
and then they should deplete in time.
excellent. Thank you. Go ahead.
Right. Thank you. As your officer said, I have the 2 directors from Oak Taverns here with me. We also have 2 of the traders who have come present, Bass and John, and a member of Oak Taverns management team also in support. So I think we start off with the backstory. Oak Taverns have been running pubs for 30 plus years. They have a number in this part of the country, and they have over time look to purchase premises which are, for want of a better description, getting on their knees in different villages, townships within the immediate area. So today we had potentially 4 applications before you. The Sun Inn was granted because no objections were received from anybody. And then we have these 3. And then on Wednesday, there's application for a further 3 sites. What has happened is, as they've refurbished the premises, invested lots of money, they decided that they did not want to focus on a food offer within the premises. They didn't want to make them gastro pubs. They wanted them to remain community pubs in their local environment. But as time has gone on and they had interactions with a lot of the street traders, they saw this mutual opportunity to bring a diverse range of food into these locations and use their assets, the car parks, and the area to the front of the premises for the traders to be located upon, and then to give into the community a very nice, diverse culinary experience. And I've just said to the guys, I watched Steve Batchel on Wales last night, and the word which comes to mind is a symbiotic relationship. It really is mutual benefit between the premises, because it draws people to their property. It's a great asset for the traders because they get to trade at times, particularly this point in the year when they don't have a lot of bookings for festivals and weddings and things like that, but also for the community, because what's come out in the representations, well, the evidence which has been submitted in support is that many of these villages, small townships, have no food offer within them. People have to drive to larger locations if they want to bring food in. They've got the opportunity now to be more sustainable, walk to the pub, have a drink, get really good quality food from the street traders. And it all seems to have come together very nicely. So how did we get to be here today? My clients hatched this idea and started talking with traders and bringing traders to their different sites and put them onto a rotation. Because all 3 applications before you today are on land owned by Oak Taverns, so in their car parks, they did not understand that under your policy for street trading, every street is designated, and unless payment is made, access that space, then a permission is required. That was brought to their attention by Laura Driscoll, and they then ceased having the traders on the sites, which caused, I understand, a little bit of a social media uproar and furore. They then took further legal advice and understood about the payment point. The guys who were doing the street trading were not getting any income, and they felt very sympathetic towards them. They were getting petitioned by members of the public as to the provision of the food, and they therefore decided to implement a token system whereby people had to buy entry into the food trading area, which circumnavigated the law. Now, they could have at that point said, we found the loophole, we're walking away from all these applications, but they didn't. They are reputable operators. They run very, very good pubs. They don't have issues with crime and disorder. They work closely with their local communities. So it was their view that they should continue with these applications and do it right, whatever the consequence may be. And they will also need, as your licensing officer has identified, if grants are made today, make applications, because a lot of these pubs are very old and are in historic locations, they're in conservation areas, listed buildings, etc. So they need to surmount some planning issues and also some change of use issues. But rather than waste people's time and efforts in running 3 different applications simultaneously, we're taking this one first and then moving from there, because it is the linchpin application. So that's how we got to be before you today. So moving to the first site, which is the Greyhound, we have done a written submission, which hopefully you've had an opportunity to read through and should compress the amount of talking I have to do, because I've tried to bring the key salient points out through that. But within the bundle of documentation we've submitted are a couple of key pages. The first page under the red lion being of, the greyhound being of importance because it shows you what the premises actually looks like on the ground. And perhaps for ease, I simply pull out of my copy of the bundle this photograph. Okay, so
It's going to be page
we're at
3 in the supplementary.
three.
report.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so for our bundle,
yeah.
and our pagination, it is,
So your pagination is not paginated.
we've got the,
So if you start off at the supplementary bundle, that's the second one.
Right.
You show the front page, then the index, and then it's this photo.
Yes, first one in. Oh, which bundle am I on? Sorry, can you give me a page? Oh, really? Yeah, right. The fat bundle. The fat bundle. Okay.
And it's,
Yeah,
because we were swamped.
Yes.
So many.
Obviously, such a bundle.
Yeah, I've got colour photo in there as well.
Yeah. It's easier on electronic.
It's so
pagination.
much easier with using technology. Thank you, go ahead, yes.
No problem at all. And apologies, the volume of response, I think, took us all by surprise. So this is the front of the premises, and this is where the street traders have been located. But they are in the point where the red arrow, very poorly drawn, goes, and there's conveniently a ban there. So the street traders would locate themselves on that point there, facing towards the remainder of the car park. And the queues are created to the front of the premises. This picture is also very helpful because one of the points raised is about lines of sight. I'll come back to it later, but while we've got the photo readily available, the junction is here. So it is proximate to a junction, as Tom Cockhill states, but actually as to lines of sight and potential hazard, the line of sight is not impacted at all. And this road is not double yellow lined or restricted in relation to parking. So the gentleman who's parking in the transit van does so lawfully and doesn't cause a problem in relation to the line of sight, people emerging from the junction. So that is the location. Turning straight away to Mr. Cockhill's comments. He describes the location, and in this instance correctly, this is put close to a junction. But he does not give any evidence of any issues arising during the period in August and September, and most recently, when the traces have been there of issues arising on that junction. He talks about indiscriminate parking, but that is a very vague description. He's not talking about illegal parking. He's not talking about legal parking. And he talks about obstruction. But indiscriminate parking has no meaning in real terms. It is a question of asking, where are people parking? But if they're parking legally, then it matters not. He almost, by use of his language, tries to trigger a moral test about where people are parking. But that is not the question before you. The criteria in relation to grant come back to public safety. It is not about moral judgment. So in this situation, we have no evidence of issues arising when the traders were there from Mr. Cockhill, who would have received communication into highways. The volume of responses from people who live in the immediate area don't indicate that there's problems arising. And the description is nebulous. It does not give a strict criteria as to what he's looking to achieve or not looking to achieve by indiscriminate parking. Mr. Beale's communication is of interest. He is interested in improving pedestrian movements in the immediate vicinity of the premises. And this has been a matter of discussion with the parish council and lots of residents in the area for quite some time. As I understand it, and my clients can give you further details, there's been 2 consultations as to changing the layout of this street junction, but neither of them could be achieved to put in a pedestrian crossing in the traditional form. So the only solution which now appears to be available would be what's called a soft crossing, which is effectively putting white lines into the roadway to help give better guidance to drivers about where the road finishes and where the pavement or pedestrian area starts. There can't be a crossing from the drop curve, so the 2 red lines that Mr. Beale's marked on his drawing, across towards the premises, because that would have to migrate on a diagonal or go into the junction itself. What we would say about this is that is very interesting, and it is a matter which clearly is being considered. But in relation to this application, the points raised do not impact upon the proposed location of the trader, which we're putting forward, nor would it be right and proper to delay making a decision on this application in a situation which is a piece of string, because nobody knows when that work is going to be undertaken, if it can ever be undertaken at all. So it would put a prohibition on this application unnecessarily and inappropriately. Turning to the comments raised by the residents, we have Dr. Hilton and an anonymous comment. Dr. Hilton actually comes to the application in the spirit of compromise, and that takes us to the other fundamental document in the bundle, which is the last item under the red line, which is our proposed additional conditions. We would suggest that, in line with Dr. Hilton's comments, that the period of trading is compressed. My client got a form. The form said, when do you want to trade? They have traders who come during the week, 7 days a week, but not every day of the week. So they wanted to leave themselves flexibility. That's why they went for 7 days. They also wanted to have the flexibility that on a weekend, the traders could be in the afternoon, but predominantly traders in midweek would be in the evening. If it's a bank holiday Monday, they might want to change the time of the traders. So the application looks incredibly wide in respect of all the premises. However, they are in agreement with Dr. Hilton, but that is too wide and it needs to be constrained. So in respect of this site, they would suggest that the maximum trading period would be 5 hours on any one day. But at absolute maximum, trader would only be on site 5 days out of 7 in any 1 week. Now that feels a lot, and they acknowledge that. That sounds like a lot of days. So they then add in another condition, which limits the number of times per consent or per annum and brings that down to 200. So we can't have someone there 5 days every week. There's just...
Could you kindly repeat that final point? Limit the number of
actual days of usage.
line overall
per
annum.
During, yes, the per annum or the period of consent, because it runs from date of consent for a year. So it's not per annum, but if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
To 200 days. So that really caps it down, even though we might have a bit more flexibility in the summer around bank holidays, school holiday times, when there's foreseeably more demand. There is a requirement under your policy, under the mandatory conditions, that there should be a bin provided. They're confirming additional bins will be provided. In relation to litter waste, I'll address this now. It covers all the sites. They have a waste contract, so they are able to take all waste from the traders So the traders don't have to worry about disposal of the waste. Obviously, we've now into the single-use plastic ban. So none of the traders can use plastic, but people like John and Baz who've got real sustainable credentials, they've been using the cardboard containers from day one. They don't even use plastic bottles, they use water in cans. And both of them have contracts with relevant councils for disposal of waste and recycling. So that is covered on. The undertaking of a litter sweep at the end of trading, and that is also codified in the document which every trader has to sign up to with Oak Taverns to get a pitch. Use that one.
And that
And
was
then-
15 minutes as well.
That was 15 minutes.
Oh, right. Well, I've just got a little bit more.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Dr. Hilton raises the issue of some of the gazebo type operators are depositing oils. So we've built an extra condition in regarding removal of fats and deposits. In relation to the concerns raised by the anonymous resident, I would ask you to look at that with a critical eye. There are numerous items raised.
Would you kindly give us a page number for that, please?
So in your original report, that is agenda item 4.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, sorry. Yes, agenda item 4, and it is page. It starts on page 30. No, we're page 28. 28.
It's too different.
Redacted.
All right.
Go on. It's a redacted
Yeah. Got it. Thank you.
representation. The comments raised fall quite often outside of the policy and or the policy requirements. So it talks a lot about children leaving school. The vans start after the school run, so 4 or 5 o'clock. The school is not close to the premises, so it complies with your policy of being more than 100 metres away or 100 yards. They talk about increasing litter, but if you've had a chance to flick through the volume of positive responses we've annexed, you'll see that everyone, including the parish council, is saying it's not caused any problems when they've been trading. They haven't seen litter, they haven't seen antisocial behaviour, they haven't seen disturbances. The last point in relation to this is that the planning permissions we've already addressed, and the stench of cooking, these guys have really good equipment. They maintain it very, very well. As part of the pre-application requirement, they had to produce all their fire safety certificates, electric certificates, and their basic food hygiene, because they are checked, not numbers on the doors, just the same as everybody else. And there has been no issues flagged with how they deal with their cooking or anything else. And I am absolutely sure that the people who lived really, really close to the Greyhound, if they could smell a stench of cooking oil, the 60+ people who've written in support would have mentioned that or wouldn't have written it. I think I've answered the points on policy. I can go through them individually if you wish, but with the written submission and what I've said, I believe we've given you everything you probably need, but we're open to questions, and I have both the directors and I have one of the traders.
Do you feel, have you sort of completed your representations now, subject to questions that we might have, or did you want to move on?
In relation to the Greyhound,
I think we'll take,
do you want to take them one by one?
did you want to?
I would suggest taking them all at once.
I think, yeah, we'll take them all at once and then we'll have questions at the end if you're happy with it.
Okay, not a problem.
Thanks.
That's round 2. So we're now moving to the Red Lion, and I believe the ladies here are from the Red Lion. So again, try and put the location into context. We have a photo, in fact 2, in the bundle. And that is of our bundle pages 28, 29, but in your supplemental bundle it may be different.
In our bundle, it's 30 and 31 in the flat bundle.
In fact, hang on.
And the flat bundle is called General Licensing Panel. We've got it, it's called supplementary.
I'll hold up my,
Yeah, got that, thank you.
Fine, yeah.
so this is the second premises, the Red Lion. The first photo shows the front of the premises. This is the second photo, which is of more importance. The second photo shows you looking into the car park of the premises. And I said in the preamble, because they were putting them on their car park, they didn't realise that they required consent to have the trailer present. Again, the photo is helpful because it shows that even with the trailer in situ, there's enough space, we believe, for 3 or 4 cars, even 5 if they're all quite small. And this is the car park which would be used by the premises. The width of the car park is such that you can't actually get cars down either side, otherwise you're bumped in. So the presence of the trailer doesn't actually take away any parking spaces. This application has attracted the same representation from Tom Coxhill, which is in content virtually identical. It talks about the premises being at the junction of High Street and Lower Inkfield Way, but this is not on the main junction where the 2 primary roads intersect. This is on the side road down leading into a housing area. Obviously, the car park for the premises has been there for a considerable period of time, as long as the premises, and the car park has been used throughout that time by customers of the premises. In relation to both this and the Greyhound, we would make the submission that we have looked at how people come to the premises. The majority of people walk. It's in their hinterland. It is a local resource. The view is that it's about 20%, so 1 in 5 of the people who use the street traders come by car. The majority, whether they come by car or walk, generally go into the premises first or place their order and then go into the premises. So they're utilising the benefit of the premises. So they're not attending and going very quickly. This is not like a takeaway offer. It may be a takeaway van, if we want to use that description, but it is not a takeaway offer. Of those persons who ring to collect an order, like you may do at your local takeaway shop, the numbers are way down at about 2.5% of all attendees. So very, very low indeed. Most people are regulars to the premises, people living in the immediate hinterland. And why most people walk is because they want to have a drink before they collect their food and or with their food, which prohibits them being able to drive because then they would be over the limit for drink driving. So that's all part of the offer, is the access to alcohol as well as food and the diversity of food. Which then takes me to the concerns raised by Mr. Cockhill and the residents. And you have submitted in the documentation a number of photos of parking. Again, Mr. Cockhill references indiscriminate parking, but doesn't define that, nor does he give you evidence of any issues arising during the use of the trading vehicles, the operators. In relation to the parking situation, the photos submitted by the objector are very, very helpful, because if you scrutinise those, you will see that there is limited yellow lines. There may be the odd single yellow line, there's not double yellow lines. And therefore, persons are electing to park where they can legally park. The objector's letter does not confirm that these photos were taken when a trader was in situ. And reading the representation, it would appear that there is most definitely issues in relation to parking in the area and the access to Cromwell Court, which isn't marked on the OS plan. The location of Cromwell Court is not visible. We believe, and we'll be corrected if we've got it wrong.
Is it pertinent to this particular?
Yeah.
Bit? Yes, go
It
ahead.
was just one point that that Michelle said, that one in 20% of our people across the pub drive. Actually, it's 20% of people that actually take the food away. So they don't, not 20% actually drive to the pub. So from our point of view, so I think we were talking earlier on to the traders, how many people take away, how many people actually take the food away, and how many people eat it in the pub. 80% eat it in the pub, 20%.
Take it in the car.
Well, don't take 20% take it
Takes
away.
away.
So it's not about driving. So Michelle made a point that said 1 in 5 people come in a car to do takeaway. That's not the case.
Right.
So it's basically 1 in 5 take it home to eat it, and
I
they've
see.
eaten the pub all the time.
And of that 1 in 5 who take it home to eat it, what percentage are taking it home in the car?
I'd be absolutely guessing at that. I would, I think from my point of view, I would say it's a smaller percentage, because most people are from the village and are walking back home, or they've had a drink first.
We can go into it more at the end, I think, as well.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. So Cromwell Court, we believe, is this little entry here.
Okay.
Very difficult to see. It is above the letter L on Lower Inkfield Way.
Let's get the
Yeah.
map on my screen. Okay. And these photographs, if I may ask, on pages on our pack, the pages 38 and 39, 40 and 41, are from Ms. Elliott,
Yeah,
the objector. Okay.
and I believe, yep, she's here today.
Okay.
What we would say is that there is an issue with parking in the area. Is that issue related to the operation of the premises? On street trading nights, we do not believe we materially impact that situation because of the statistics of the number of people who come by car, walk, and the fact that there is parking in the car park for those persons who want to use it. Of the remainder of Miss Elliott's representation, we have to say the emergency access to Cromwell Court, we have no control over that at all. It would be a matter for the Highways Department, and they've elected not to come today to put yellow lines at the entrance to Cromwell Court to stop people parking there. If people are parking there, they do so lawfully. In relation to the comments in respect to the marquee, they are not for this panel today. They are matters for the Licensing Act under the planning. They are nothing to do with the street traders. So taking us to the policy points on public safety, this site is near a junction but not on a junction, and there's no lines of sight impacted at all. The premises has its own parking facilities. The evidence of numerous people who've written in support over 50 is that parking is not an issue, and these people live in the immediate vicinity, and there are people in the bundle from Inkfield Way. There are people who live opposite, within 100 metres, 50 metres, and they can be identified. On public order, there's absolutely nothing from the police, and the representation is confirmed. There's no rowdy customers, no disorder. On nuisance, within our bundle, you'll see direct comments from people who live in the area confirming they've never seen any litter. The traders clean up after themselves and leave it in a clean state, tidy state. We have parish councillors saying that they've not been asked about the operation of the traders and are confident that it works. So we have significant community support against two people who I think rightly raise issues about the level of yellow lines so that they can gain access in and out of Cromwell Court. But that is not a matter for today's hearing, and that is a matter for Highways to resolve, because we are not trading in Cromwell Court. We are not trading in front of their premises. We are trading on our own property. And lots of positive communication, which if you skim through, you'll see all the very good feedback. It's not close to a school. Nobody raises any issues with any of the stalls at all. So nobody's queried the nature, style, size of any of the traders. And there's no similar business nearby for any of the sites. So sort of jumping between the grey and the red line to try and make it a bit more compact. We understand that the local residents might be wary. It's a change. People are nervous about change. They see potential impact. This was a quite depleted pub, which had been really run down, held by the same tenant for 16 years. My clients have come in, they've made it beautiful, they've made it popular. And they're giving people in the community a great asset. Again, in the bundle, you will see that we've put in additional conditions to mitigate the width of the initial application. So in relation to this site, it's actually less than the Greyhound.
Yeah, 4 days. I see.
4 days, 5 hours per day, 200 days per annum. There wasn't any issues raised about the oil, and it's on their car park. It's much more on their car park, this one. So we didn't feel we needed to burden the application with that. We think it's a reasonable proposal, and particularly with the car park facility which they've got. Again, we're open to questions when you're ready.
We'll do them at the end. Let's fly through it. No, thank you. Do you feel you've had your
Yeah,
say
I
on
think
that?
we've covered everything.
I'm sure the panel will have questions at
Yeah.
the end. Yeah. Let's do the cross keys one.
Right, so the cross keys is much shorter.
Great. Not great.
Completely understood. So
Sorry, Chair, very briefly, as that was about 15 minutes,
Yeah.
I think it's fair to give the next one 15 minutes, but then give equal time to the objector category, if that's okay.
Oh, I know we're making all our submissions in series, but do you think it would be better to hear from the objectors on the red line now, so that it's sort of in context?
It's my discretion, and I think we might take a pause and allow the objectors from the red line who are here, if they're here.
Yeah.
Oh, you're here. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So you've heard the submission regarding the red line.
Yeah.
I think we might actually, regarding the red line, should we just do this?
We could just do this speakers now.
And then we'll do our
We'll
question.
give them equal time as
Yeah,
what the
absolutely.
applicants.
I just thought it might keep it.
It's okay. So we'll come. Thank you for coming. Thanks for listening. So you've just heard the submission from the applicant regarding the red line. So you've got 15 minutes to.
God.
Well, you might not need it, but yeah, thank you for coming. Yeah.
No, thank you. Yes, no, absolutely. And our biggest concern, and it's you said it's 2 objectors. It's actually 5 from Lower and from report that we were writing on behalf of, as well as I understand from the pack there was another lady as well who isn't here. Our issue has never been about lit up. It's never not been clean. There's never been a fight in the car park that we've seen. You know, we've moved into those houses between 2007 and 2009. We are chilling people. We're not come in as, you know, new people to the village and that we don't like change. We are supporters of the pub. Myself and my partner go to the pub to drink. It's not that. It is down to the safety of where the cars are parking on Lower Ricknield Way. You were showing one of the photos, which is actually showing not the high street picture, which is the front of the pub, the other picture, which is showing basically from my house into the red line car park. So you're not seeing, apart from the photos that we've submitted, of what we get on a daily or 5 days a week basis of trying to get out onto that main road, which is one of the main roads in and out of the village, and the main road that will take you then out to, or they're using that to go out to the M40, of what we have to deal with. It is extremely dangerous, and there has been at times, or somebody I certainly know from sort of our area has almost knocked somebody off a bike trying to get out of there. So when you've got cars parked between from number 5 to 9, 5, 7 and 9, which is directly in front of my house, you cannot see along Lower Ricknield or Lower Road, and then you cannot see what is coming down the high street. So if you have got, say, 2 cars and you can see down Lower Road, you can still not see what's coming down the high street. It is just, you just cannot see a thing. You are edging out constantly, and it will be, I mean, touch wood, there's not been any accidents out there. But is it going to be a matter of time where we are trying to pull out and the front of our cars are taking off and we're going to be the ones in the wrong because we've caused an accident by pulling out in front of a car, which then impacts as well on our daily lives. Obviously coming out of Cromwell Court, which is where, like I say, the 6 houses do have our car parking because we don't have driveways. We have got our front doors on the main street. Again, that road, and I'm obviously coming in and out of there daily. There's 2 cars that park on that road. One car parks in front of number 17. The other car, that's a white van. The other car parks a little bit further down the road in front of numbers 39, 41, because again, they don't actually have driveway. So I know how much impact on the traffic and safety these food vans, or we know how much impact those food vans are bringing trouble and safety issues to that road. It's difficult. Obviously, people are supporting it, and you know, we are local. We want to support local business, but the people that are supporting aren't aware of what the objections are. So on social media, somebody did actually say, happy to support, but would be interested to understand the objections first. Well, the reply to that from Oak Taverns, or the Red Lion, says we don't know and won't know any information until the hearing. So the people that are supporting the pub aren't aware, because they're in that bubble. They're parking up outside. It's no trouble to them to park up outside and go and get their food, but they don't realise the impact they're having on the residents on a daily basis. So they'll get their food, they'll drive away again. Somebody else is going to come along, get their food. They're idling outside the properties. There's the noise outside the properties with car doors slamming and things. It is an issue. You know, we wouldn't be here if this wasn't an issue for our households. And with regards to the emergency access down Cromwell Court, which has said it's not really an issue. Emergency vehicles cannot get down Cromwell Court where we park. At the back of Cromwell Court, there is 3 properties as well. You cannot, that driveway is not wide enough to get an emergency vehicle down there. So if an emergency vehicle is needed, whether that's an ambulance or fire engine, they need to be as close by as possible, which when people are parking on that road, they can't be close by. And in the event of an emergency, certainly if it's an ambulance, time is of the essence to get to those people at the back. So, you know, that is part of the objection, and, you know, because obviously the people living out there have objected too. As I say, the people that, there is obviously a lot of support. There is obviously a lot of drivers coming to the pub, because at the end of the day, a lot of people do use it as a takeaway service. Obviously, I don't have the figures as to how many people use it as a takeaway service. But if you're living a 20-25 minute walk across the village, you're not walking your takeaway and your burger home. So by the time you walk home, it gets cold. You are driving. And, you know, there is lack of parking. You will probably get, as they quite rightly said, the applicants rightly said, you'll probably get 4 cars in the car park. People are also parking at the front of the pub because, again, there's nowhere else to park, which, again, there is double yellows out there. So would double yellows help? We don't know. Are people, you know, thinking, well, you know, it's not policed and we're just going to be here 5-10 minutes while we go and get, you know, our burgers or whatever. But obviously that 5-10 minutes when there's a constant flow of traffic does impact us. So, do you want to?
Yeah, the point, there's a couple of points I'd like to make. The argument that Chiller is not well provided with takeaways and things is not really true, because there are 3 restaurants within 200 yards of our road, which have been there 20 or 30 years. There's a Chinese restaurant, which is a takeaway. There's a fish and chip restaurant, and there is also an Indian restaurant, which is virtually opposite the pub in question, which also does takeaway. They have their own car parking facilities, so it's never been a problem. So to argue that, okay, this pub was my pub for 30 years as well, and I've got nothing against the food bans per se. It's the parking, which is atrocious. It's also dangerous. My son is disabled, and he was actually run over on that corner 6 years ago by somebody doing 50, I think the hospital said 50 miles an hour. He was probably doing along that road, which is very dangerous. And actually, since it's been made 20 miles an hour, the whole of the village is now 20 miles an hour, it's worsened because people come across the speed bumps into the village, think they've lost a bit of time, so they make it up by going faster. And they do. And at night, you hear them rattling around at 50 miles an hour.
If we could keep the comments
I'm
in
sorry,
relation to
but
the, yeah, because these are general
important.
highways issues
Yeah,
that don't
yeah.
necessarily relate
Should
to.
we actually go to the highways department?
Yeah. Well, quite. So, but that would be a highways issue that would be concerned.
Yes, I appreciate that.
Yeah, but I take your point about concerns around
Right.
planning. Yeah. Do you feel you've said everything you wanted to say to him?
Yeah, like I say, we are villagers. We have been in the village, you know, I've been in the village 48 of my 49 years and lived opposite the pub for coming up 15 years. You know, it is our local pub. So it is difficult to be sat here, I'm sorry, you know, with this. But we wouldn't be sat here if this wasn't an issue, a safety issue for us.
Thank you very much. I think what we'll do is we'll take the questions at the end, because otherwise we'll end up in this particular one for a long time. So if you wouldn't mind waiting till the end, and thank you very much. So did you want to move on now to the cross keys, and then we'll address the various issues at the very end. Thank you.
Right, so in relation to cross keys, you heard the preliminary submission, but within that was comments regarding the relevance of the representation of Mr. Cocktail. So it was in two parts. So I'd just like to go back to the points of relevance. In respect of this premises, again, you have a photograph in the bundle, and you will see that it has the benefit of an even larger car park.
It's page 59, that big one.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you.
So this premises has substantial car park. It's on a distinct side road, not near a junction at all. And there are double yellow lines to the side of it. Mr. Cockshell's representation in relation to this premises is, in the last two paragraphs, an absolute carbon copy of what he says in relation to the Greyhound and the Red Lion. He says it's a junction of St George's Road and Station Road, busy roundabout junction. There's clearly no issues with lines of sight and access. And he then goes into his phraseology of indiscriminate or obstructed parking. Well, in this instance, people would have to illegally park because there's double yellow lines. It came in late as a representation. I respectfully submit it was a device to have this application in respect of the cross keys before you for whatever reason. No member of the public has raised any objection to this at all. And again, we have 30 members of the public saying we've seen the traders there. They don't cause us any problems when we're looking at the policy requirements in relation to public safety, crime and disorder, litter, proximity to school, or anything else. If Mr. Cockshell had said, when the traders are there, my traffic warden team have had to issue 4 times as many fixed penalty notices for illegal parking, there would be some interest in his representation. If he said, I have heard from colleagues that this premises, since the traders have been involved, has got higher levels of volume of traffic, and we've got people emerging and rushing, etc. There is nothing in his representation which is relevant or pertinent to the application at all. And even worse than that, the whole content of the representation is exactly what you said about 2 other premises before you today and 3 which are before your colleagues from Vale Council. So although I understand that you've allowed it to proceed on basis of material consideration, I can only submit that the weight of this representation is negligible, if anything at all. It does not address or engage with the application before you and should, in your determination, be considered in that light. The question is a bit shorter.
Great. Thank you very much. I think you've addressed the other policy issues
Sort of,
overall, haven't you? Yeah.
yeah, I tried not to on each one, but yeah.
Thank you. I think we can now go to panel questions. Is that right? Yeah. So do any members of the panel have any questions for the applicant?
For the applicant.
Yeah.
No.
No?
Yes, I just have a question regarding the limited hours and days that you're proposing that you'll run. I do know the areas, we all live in South Oxfordshire, we're all on Facebook, we all use pubs, you know, so we think we're quite comfortable with what your offer is. But with regards to the limited hours or the limited days, how would that be policed or recorded for the benefit of the neighbourhood, if you like, who, you know, I understand that whether we like it or not, there will always be an impact on the residents, simply by virtue of there being a food outlet outdoors that wasn't there before. So how will you police or record the hours of operation?
So there's quite a complicated booking system for the traders because they've got 11 traders using potentially 8-9 sites. So the traders have to request and be authorised when they can go to a site, because we can't have 2 traders on one site. That's not good for the premises, it's not good for the community, it's not good for the pubs, because it would take away in the car parking locations too much space. So each one has to book. They are issued with, and I put it into the bundle, their trading policy documents if they're a new trader, and then they directly engage with the manager on site, and then the manager allows them access onto the space, helps them access the space, and then it is going to be logged the time of effectively the slot. So when they book their day, they will book their time slot as well. And then it will be for the manager, who does a litter check at the end of the sessions anyway, when they've got traders currently using the space. They do a litter check with them. They would then come out and say, right, you need to be taking your last orders if there's a queue or anything. Or they would be saying, right, your time is up now. You need to be vacating the site, pulling the shutters down.
Is this data that will be available to residents or to the public, or is this just sort of in-house for your own records?
I mean, I think from our point of view, we use Outlook calendars.
Just to satisfy.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think you'd have to say, you ask me now, I'd have to say it's more of an internal document rather than a document that will be allowed elsewhere. I mean, what we do, we also obviously advertise on Facebook. So I think, that will then put it into the public domain effectively. But if somebody wanted to check themselves, and they could, I presume somebody came to us or they wanted to ask us that question, we could go down that route, or they could just tot it up themselves on Facebook if that's how they wanted to operate it.
Yeah, I don't think people should have to. I was just curious that
You run an Excel spreadsheet.
Yeah, I think from our point of view, we could exactly, that information is available to us on the back of these calendars and things that we operate on.
Are you required to submit that information to the licensing team? Is that part of?
Well, we haven't suggested that, as it's a condition on the consent if it's granted.
Yeah.
And if the licensing officer wanted to see evidence of compliance with the conditions, they could demand that documentation. And if it wasn't forthcoming, you draw whatever conclusions you wanted from that. So I think it would be sort of part of enforcement and/or check-in steps that the licensing officer would have the ability to say, can I please see your data on number of days? How many have you used? We're halfway through the year. What's your expectations? And that data would be available to the licensing officer.
I think the other thing as well is that, and this today in my head is just the start. This is just the whole policy it's not aimed at what we're trying to do with these traders. We need to sort of review the policy, which I understand you're already doing. you know, we had a great dialogue with the environmental health, for example, and the HO departments, who effectively, with a lot of these street traders, don't know where they are. Now, if we could put some sort of policy together that would just turn around and so they knew where these traders were, then we could go down that route. But again, this policy doesn't affect that. The whole thing needs to be properly looked at to enable the, you know, the colleagues in the HO to be a part of it, and obviously from our point of view, and the licensing thing. But again, this is, you know, we are, you know, we're trying to crowbar what we do into the current structure, which is just not fit for purpose. But we all know that, which is why we spent longer than 15 minutes trying to go through this process. But look, I think, you know, I think from our point of view, that information's there. As I said, you know, we've got 8 sites in Oxfordshire and the Vale of Whitehorse. We cannot be seen to be doing things, you know, we've invested a lot of money in this area, and, you know, we've got to do things right. And we want to be able to work with the council to make sure, which is why we're here today, which is why we're trying to go down this route, to make sure this whole thing, you know, works for everybody.
Thank you. Kelly, you had a question.
Yeah, can you tell me what steps you're taking on each of the sites to make sure that you're not duplicating what's offered in the village? So, for example, the lady mentioned that there were Indian restaurants, so making sure that your Indian food providers aren't there. Obviously at the Red Lion. Well, yeah, then there's that in one of the villages. I saw Tico's fish and chips on a Monday night, making sure that your offering isn't fish and chips on a Monday night. Is any of that taken into account? How do you?
I mean, I'm going to say, you know, the honest answer is no. You know, I think from our point of view, I think it's like a lot of these things is, I think that if you look at the, you know, obviously the fish and chips and the Chinese takeaway, they do very specific things that are very difficult to do in a food van, for example. So it's difficult to do crispy duck in a food van. You know, it's just not a possible option. And I think the Indian, yes, it does the takeaway, but it's more of a restaurant. It's a sort of 40, 50 or 60, 70 seater restaurant. And that's more of an occasion that people go into it. And I think from our point of view, you know, I'm thinking about the, you know, the sort of, you know, some of the traders we do, it's like very regional Indian dishes, if you will. So it's not like a general, it's not like a chicken tikka masala that you get. It's like some sort of regional sort of street food type dish. And it's like 2 or 3 dishes. So it's, I don't feel as though that we are, you know, we are competing directly with them. Of course we are, because we're obviously, but I mean, you could argue I'm a pub. And if I wanted to turn my pub into an Indian restaurant, I probably could if I wanted to. But, you know, I'm just trying to be able to work to offer something a little bit different to what the rest of the, I mean, interestingly, in China, there are 2 Indian restaurants.
Okay, it's just I'm mindful that if you're supplying several of the same things in a village of just over 7,000 people, and Wallingford 11,500 people, I can't remember the population of the third, that it's when it is that similar, you know, type, it is definitely competition actually. And if you're not just marketing to the people in those villages, you're marketing outside, which then increases the traffic and the parking. So this is the lines that I'm thinking on here, and the impact on them all as a whole, because I feel that if you're doing one thing, it can be detrimental the other way. So I'm trying to find the balance in my head and show that there is consideration from you guys not to impact on particularly the traffic from further afield to get people in, or to compete with those in, you know, already in a village, a small village.
I think that if you look at Appendix A, there's 11 traders. They're quite diverse. Like Lucas Schwarmer is Greek-ish stuff.
Yeah, I've seen all the villages.
Yeah, so, and they're on a rotation. They can't sort of, school language, baggy the best spot all the time. So they're into a rotation and going to the different sites, because the guys really try to make it fair for all the traders who they're engaged with. So even on the sites where there may be 5 days, perhaps over a bank holiday, you're going to get levels of variety rotating through, and they may only be there 1 day that week, and then not there for 2 weeks, and then 1 day the next week. Because of the volume of traders they've got, they can put that rotation in and then try to have less impact on those who are already there. They want to keep the traders almost as having a novelty value, but they're not there all the time. They have an interest.
Thank you. One more question, if I may. How many, when the Red Lion had a full car park, how many parking spaces were there originally? Before the marquee?
Before the marquee,
yeah.
We reckon that, as is interesting, because obviously we knew the site previously. So before the marquee, there was probably maybe 7, 8.
Okay.
Because what you had is because as Michelle explained, it's a strange shape. It's a rectangle. You can only get cars parked at one side.
like Tetris, really.
Yeah, it's exactly like Tetris, and I think from our point of view, so it was, although I think clearly it took up a number of spaces, it wasn't massively detrimental to what we're trying to achieve it. And actually now it can even be more like Tetris because you're going to park in your car park, you can park next to each other, around each other, and the back of each other.
So after the marquee, it went down to 4, which is what you mentioned. There's about 4 now.
Four is a conservative and sensible number. You could squeeze 5 in, but 4 is the sensible number.
And the food truck doesn't lessen that amount at all.
The food truck probably takes, so the food truck, no, because what happens with the food truck, because of, as I said about the size of the car park, the food truck can sit in the car park. Where the people would then back up and
In a
come
bit
out.
of a turning, so they'll have to do quite a bit of turning.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
What I'm trying to determine in my head is whether the food truck has caused more of a parking issue or whether it is things that are out of our control that happened before. So I'm trying to determine
Yeah, I get that.
the parking space in relation to the parking issues and everything like that.
And I would say, clearly from our point of view is, I would, one answer, it depends. One answer you could say no, because you've got this turning circle thing that you've got, but you've also got, it is taking space up in the car park. So, it doesn't matter which way you're around it, you're going to take it. That is, there is that option. But actually, the way that, clearly people are going to be queuing, they're going to be queuing into the sort of pub or into the garden area rather than into the more car parking spaces and making it dangerous. So, from my point of view, I think you get a similar amount of cars in, if it is, it's 1 at best, but I don't even think it's that on a busy Friday night, it's still got the same amount of cars that are in there.
Thank you. I've got a question about the red line at Chinner as well, because we've got some competing evidence, and you spoke about the statistics of 20% of people are taking away, a smaller percentage again are taking away in cars, but that directly contradicts the evidence from the objectors who are located opposite the pub, one of whom is at least, who report seeing more volume of traffic and more volume of vehicles coming and going to get takeaways. So could you talk us through this evidence that you compiled? How did you do it?
It's a very good question. It's a conversation we're having with our traders, trying to work out, because obviously when people eat in, they because obviously it's not our data, effectively it's the traders' data, if you will. And we were just having a conversation with how many actually do you package it and put it in bags that people then walk away with it, and how we just give them cartons and they sit at the table and eat it. And I think it's very difficult because sometimes what happens is, which is the point I was making before, is that somebody will come in for a drink, have a drink, order the food, have a drink, take it home and walk home with it. And, so you would, back to Michelle's point, I don't think that is, people, you wouldn't expect people to be driving because they could have a drink first. Now, it's not always an alcoholic drink, it could be a soft drink, but they could, from that point of view. We don't see, from one of the points the objectors make, people with their cars constantly running outside, for example, we haven't seen that, but again, I don't live over the road from it. So, from my point of view, I don't think I don't feel that that's a big issue for us. But again, all we can do is respect what sort of Julia said, when she's come today with her objection. So I think
Simon has tried to talk to Julie, because I think you both appreciate, because you're a long-term resident of Chinner.
Yeah.
But Julie's problem is that people can park right up to your entrance, can't they? There's no yellow lines, there's no white lines to give.
So you have to come right out before you've got any visibility.
Yeah. And whether they're people from the pub, whether they're other residents, the white van man, or whatever, they have a problem emerging from their entrance. And Simon suggested, shall we both talk to highways? Can we we'll buy you some cones if that'll make life easier. But you can't just randomly place cones on a place where people can legally park.
So I guess what I was thinking by asking that question was, how much weight do I put on the evidence? But what I'm gathering is that this is sort of anecdotal evidence that you've gathered from traders. It's not been a formal survey as such. There's not been a traffic survey done. Certainly that hasn't come from highways. So
no, exactly. I think it's exactly anecdotal at this stage. And I think, in our head, it wasn't. And if you think about our original plan of doing this, and let's not explain it, it was about trying to keep people in our pub and sell more drinks at the bar, as opposed to setting up a food takeaway service. I think what's happened is that, if people are coming to there and taking food away and not into the pub, then clearly it's not encouraged at our end for obvious reasons, because we're not getting any, because we don't take any rent off the traders, we don't take a percentage of sales, we don't take any of this. It would just be, from our point of view, which is the whole reason we're here. Because I think if we could guarantee everybody sat in the pub and ate a burger, we wouldn't be here.
Yeah.
Because we can't do that, and nor would we want to do that, but then nor did we realise that the traders needed a special licence to be on our own land to do that, which is where we find ourselves here today. And I don't, you know, and going back to what we said, these traders tend to be young entrepreneurs that have built their business up. I don't want to discourage it. Could they, if they're a success, we're a success.
I've got another question about the Greyhound. The sighting of the vans, which you described as here, where the 2 cars is that a newly agreed sighting? Because I've actually bought a fish and chips.
I was wondering this.
That's right.
The other side, I'm sorry, I drive to church the whole time, and so I know the pub. And I bought a fish and chips from the. It wasn't a van; it was a marquee arrangement, I think.
Yeah.
And it was located there.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I think originally it was. I think originally was there because again, this situation from our point of view, we put it there, we put it there. We didn't think that this was a major issue. Do you know what I mean? So whereas now we're in that point where, you know, and I think Michelle's made the point about the highways being worried about that junction. You could then, why would you just do it to the other side?
So you'll move it there, and then I mean the reality is this is your parking area. People can park their cars anywhere here. That's correct.
Let me just sort of. I don't know why I'm saying this, but I think, you know, maybe Michelle could be kicking me under the phone. That we own probably 3/4 of that road, of that parking bit there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think what happens is there is a paving section there
Right.
that nobody knows exactly where it was and where it isn't.
Yeah.
And I think one of the objections.
Not an objection, it's a stipulation. We think we might need to get highways permission because our queues may
Half of it may go
come onto the highways list.
I appreciate your honesty with that.
It's this very strange triangle on the corner.
Yeah.
But this is the area where they've tried to look at highways and putting in a proper curve, and it's been rejected. And it's from that point there that they wanted to put a crossing across, but they can't. So as I understand it, they're thinking about more white lines to try and define, you know, sort of where everything finishes.
It is a dog's breakfast there, as you know, because you've got these passing places and the parked cars, the people coming over with Church Bridge, and you're pulling and you know, it's a mess. But that's not really your fault, actually, in this sense. But so this, you could conceivably get 4 cars parked on that forecourt at the moment. Do you ever have? You don't, do you though?
Again, it is one of these. It is a, you know, it's because I come back to your point. You know, even people in Pangbourne know it's a nightmare trying to park anywhere near around here, and there's not even like streets that you can go and park down. So, you know, from our point of view, you know, yes, obviously the car parking spaces are used, but, you know, I think they're not widely used. And I think also coming back to, if we converted all of these pubs into gastro pubs, which seems to be the sort of what everybody can't believe we're not doing. Why aren't you cooking your own food? Why aren't we doing gastro pubs? You know, people would drive to these things. You'd have a bigger issue with the parking.
So so it's a requirement, it's a condition, is it, that the van / marquee would be located where those 2 cars are parked? So at the north end of that forecourt.
I think. So I may have misinterpreted this. It may be that there's a benchmark, you know, like for measuring height on the corner of the pub. I thought it was an arrow pointing to where they were going to do it on the Ordnance Survey map. But when I spoke with clients, we all agreed that that was the most sensible point, because you've got to get it away from the junction. You can't have it near the junction for either lines of sight or pedestrian and safety for queuing. Whereas at the other end, you've got the depth to get the vehicles in place. You don't impact line of sight. So if I've started a hair running wrongly, I'm just looking at it again, because beside it there is a smudgy green block. So that might have been where it was originally put, but we would seek to amend the application, which I think is allowed under your policy, to have it in that very far end parking spot, which makes so much more sense for safety.
Abutting the next door house rather than
but it would have its back to the next door house. So it shouldn't invade any of their privacy, and they've not objected at all, the next door neighbour.
Have they provided a submission at all?
Yeah, I think again, it's difficult to know which one that we did try to. She said that one of them that was
Somebody said they were next
adjacent to it.
adjacent.
There's only one. I suppose it's at the back. I suppose you could have it's adjacent.
Unless it's the one with the U hedge, but Okay,
But we do have, and we've scanned through people on the doorstep saying, I don't have a problem with it.
yeah, but yeah. And finally, one quick one regarding the condition of Whitchurch in particular. That's the only one where you've got this condition about cleaning up oil. What about the possibility of drip trays rather than a clean-up condition?
Either would work.
So from a condition point of view.
It could be
It
either
might be
or.
something that the traders could give us some insight. They may not be able to, I don't know, drip tray.
They can fit into their facilities.
So the two guys who come there in vehicles,
Right.
not in a
So not
gazebo.
relevant.
Um,
Okay.
but if you wanted either or, like we have, there shouldn't be a mark left.
As I say, I mean, clearly, as you can imagine, from my point of view, this is not, I don't want grease marks in the front of my pub. So, from our point of view, this is not a, this is not a purely residence issue. I think if I turned up and the place was full of grease, clearly it would be something that I wouldn't be over enamored with. So I'm happy to sort of, look at anything that would stop that. And I don't think it's a big issue. I think it may have happened on one occasion with one trader. And I think, this is not something that happens constantly, if you see.
May I ask a question to the objectors at this stage?
Are we finished at the moment? Oh, yes, yeah, I need the Wi-Fi code from Darius to keep accessing because the signal here is dropping.
Go ahead, ask them question.
Sorry, before we do licensing and then any objectors' questions for them
Sorry.
as well.
Yes,
Yeah,
we can.
yeah.
Thank you, Darius. So does the panel have any more questions for the applicant?
No.
No. Thank you. Does the licensing officer have any questions for the applicant? You don't. Thank you, Ashley. Does any other relevant party wish to ask a question of the applicant? No? Okay, thank you. Darius, do I now move on?
You would do questions to the objectors.
Does any member of the panel have any questions for the objectors?
I would just like to ask, I can see that this is difficult for you.
It is, yes.
Yeah, I understand that. I don't believe from what I've heard from you that you're looking for the business to fail. And I'm just wondering, from your perspective, what eases your mind? What would ease your mind? Is it reduced? Is it the reduced hours that they've put forward, or what I think you suggested that you'd like to reach a compromise. And I'm just curious to know, because my overriding concern, regardless of the discussion that's been put on, it isn't actually Thomas Cochrana's statement. It's the people who live closest.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering what you're hoping to, if I may ask that, what you're hoping to achieve from today's.
Like I say, it's local pub. We drink over there. It's like I say, we have briefly discussed yellow lines. Like I say, would that really work? Because it can't be policed, and people will be thinking, well, I'm only going to be here for 5 minutes, so I'm just going to get my burger and then I'm going to leave. So is that realistic that it would work? Do you think, right, well, okay, the busiest time on those roads is Monday to Friday. So, because obviously that's when the traffic's going through, the starting the vans from 4 o'clock, rush hour traffic, that road's busy till 7 o'clock. Do you say, right, well, okay, you're better off, or would it work if we just did Saturday and Sunday? I understand that's limiting, for the Red Lion, but as a compromise, does that keep all parties happy? Something else I could bring up, and unfortunately this isn't necessarily in Red Lion's favour, but it would be in the favour of the food vendors, is somebody mentioned in one of their supportive emails about they've never had any issues where the fish and chip van park. Well, that's a car park up at the top of the village, which is a car park which is for during the day for people that are attending the shops. During every evening, there isn't anything there. So it helps the food vendors that they've got somewhere to vend. People can park there. Like I said, unfortunately, that doesn't help the Red Lion.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for the objector from the panel?
Yeah. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
And being on YouTube and everything, it is quite hard when you're sort of below voice, I understand. The parking issues that you faced, clearly that's stressful.
Yeah.
I live in a very similar place in my town. We have to have special rubbish collections even with smaller vans because people just park illegally constantly. So I really do understand. but I'm uncertain as to whether these particular parking issues have been made worse by the food vans, and that's what I'm trying to
Yes,
sort of
they
figure
have.
out.
Yeah.
So I were the parking issues there, were they really bad prior to all of these takeaways at all, prior to the marquee?
No, we may have got some additional cars with the marquee if people were driving. But no, it is villagers coming for their burgers, taking away their food. It has impacted a lot. Like I say, on the road, a lot of people have driveways and things, so they're not parking on the road on a day-to-day basis. All down Lower Road, there's all down Lower Road up until Elderdean. You have 2 cars parked there. So all the other cars that are parked, generally, obviously these people might have visitors going to their houses. Obviously, I don't know, but generally we see that it is,
The increase has been since the food truck. So not, for example, say since the marquee was placed, they're taking away some of the things.
no, possibly not.
I'm just trying to determine if there was a parking issue,
Before.
before the food
How
trucks
much-
and how
yeah.
much, they're impacting on.
Are there any other questions for the objectors? No. Okay, thank you. Does the licensing officer have any questions? No. Okay. Would any other, no other questions? Then, no? Okay. So, thank you. I think that,
If the applicant,
would the applicant like to provide a summing up?
oh,
Yes,
sorry,
please.
before that, would the applicant like to have any questions?
Oh, do you, I beg your pardon, do you have any questions for the objectors?
I don't think we do. No, no.
Thank you. Would you like to provide your summing up now, please?
I will please.
Thank you.
So a huge amount to digest in relation to the 3 sites, but I think it is a point of drilling down in your determination as to each of the 3 sites and how the application for the 11th Street traders sits into each of those locations. I think the first point is that none of the representations or objections raise any concerns whatsoever about the traders themselves. And that is one of your policy items as to the nature of the vehicle or the device which is being used to sell from. So that appears to be a point where there is no contention at all as to the nature of the vehicles, the suitability of the traders and their food hygiene, electrical certificates, gas certificates. So that takes us purely to the locations. And the first point is that each of the locations is on land wholly owned or principally owned by Oak Taverns. So this is not the public highway, this is private land which they have elected to use. They have other hurdles to surmount in relation to planning permission and in relation to the greyhound who owns all the front, but in principle it is their space, and all 3 have the benefit of a car park. And as Simon said, if they decided when they were doing up the pubs to put in a fully fitted kitchen and made themselves gastro pubs or brought in a renowned chef, there would be no application before you. It would be within the premises. And this is an application whereby they're providing the same food. They're providing an experience which people are finding very positive and is generating interest. But because they are located outside, it comes into this environment. But would the actual impact be any different if they had a good kitchen inside? The same numbers of people, the same attendances. That is, in our submission, unlikely. We have a very small difference, which is the people who potentially just come and take away straight away. That wouldn't happen in the pub. Of those people, we know that the majority come on foot and pick up their deliveries, even if they're taking them home. The whole point of the exercise is to drive traffic into the pub as well as for the street traders. And the premises see volumes of sales on the day when the traders are there. So we know that the alcohol sales are present, and by virtue of that, a lot of people will not be able to drive or will not want to drive. For most of the sites, we have clear evidence that there's sufficient parking readily available. So in respect of the Cross Keys and the Red Lion, the premises can provide a number of parking spaces. In relation to the Greyhound, it can also provide parking spaces, but the local reputational area for parking is so bad, very, very few people elect to try to drive and park. They come on foot. So we have a very much a local hinterland for the operation of the site. And those persons in that local hinterland confirming in volumes that they're happy with the situation, that we are not seeing issues in relation to the policy relating to crime, nuisance, litter, noise. We don't have the issues with the proximity of the schools, but we do have a couple of residents close by saying we feel that we are impacted or could be impacted. And in relation particularly to the Red Lion, we have to look at Mr. Cockhill's representation. He is from Highways, but he uses language which I've described before as slightly odd because it has no clarity, he provides no evidence. This talk of indiscriminate parking. And as we've just heard from Miss Elliott, the people aren't parking illegally. There's no yellow lines, there's no white lines, so they're parking where they are allowed to park. They don't realise the impact, and that could be people, as Miss Elliott's just said, visiting friends who live in the immediate vicinity, people frequenting the pub, or anything else. But their parking is lawful because there are no yellow lines at that side of the road.
Technically, while it's legal to park on a pavement, it's actually illegal to drive on it to get there. So
Yes,
and they're parking on the pavement there.
Yes, but we don't know if they're customers. You make an absolutely valid point, councillor, because Julie talked to us about the white van, and it's the white van which is on, I don't know if it's the same white van, but on two of the photos, who is a resident who can't park in front of his house because he hasn't got a driveway, and therefore is electing to park in the immediate vicinity. And we don't know how many of the other people on those photos are there for that reason of occupancy, or frequenting the premises, or drawn by the trader, because we don't know the dates on which these photos were taken. It is clearly congested, but there is no clear nexus. There is no evidence in those photos to link the two. And my clients want to work with the resident opposite. They've even offered to talk to Highways with them because they understand the problem they've got with lines of sight. But that does not necessarily flow from the operation of their premises. My client's just saying he would really like me to draw to your attention the comments of Councillor David Cook, which is in your bundle as supplemental, I believe, who confirms that he's local parish councillor. He doesn't receive concerns and complaints about the operation of Red Lion since it's had the street traders, and he hasn't observed problems either. Now, these people live opposite, it's their day-to-day existence. There's a conversation to be had with Highways, but that conversation is distinct and separate from the application before you today. My clients, however, totally accept that what they asked for in the initial paperwork was too wide, and they can understand why people might be shocked and horrified by the possibility of street traders there 7 days a week, all day. That's why we've put the additional proposals forward. We are totally open to wording in relation to drip trays or grease removal, because as Simon said, he doesn't want that disfiguring his premises. They've spent so much money bringing these premises back to life. Their biggest crime is that they've made tired old pubs, which were on the edge of dereliction, popular. They've made them a hub of the community and they're giving the community something. That's their biggest crime today. What they want to do is work with the community. They've put forward for all 3 sites moderation as to number of days, number of hours. However, what we would say is the evidence from highways is incredibly weak. It does not substantiate anything at all in relation to issues. And we take on board the comments of the residents, which we believe are valid. That's why we've altered the conditions. But the volume of communication of those persons who've elected to write in support shows such a width of response. So for every one objector, we have at least 2 people saying we don't see a problem. And they may all not live opposite, but a lot of them live very, very close indeed. They've written these in their own words. It's not a carbon copy email, but you sometimes get on applications of this nature where it's gone round the neighbourhood and everybody's signed it. These are genuine personal comments by a huge number of people for all 3 sites. And just going lastly to the Cross Keys, in connection with the Cross Keys, there is nothing else. There is nothing except for the carbon copy document from highways in relation to the application. And that document in that context, as I've said earlier, I believe has negligible weight in your deliberations.
I'm afraid no. No.
I just wanted to say the reason why that we ended up doing all of the putting all those dates on was not being clever, is because your form was not fit for purpose. We couldn't separate it out.
No, that's fine. We can consider that. Yeah, thank you.
I think you've heard so much, you've got so much to look
That's
at.
fine. Thank you very much. Now I shall turn to the licensing officer. Did you want to provide a summing up now?
No, I don't have any summing.
Thank you. I think you provided your summing up, so you're happy that you've
Yeah,
Had you
yes, I
say-
mean, yes, I mean, I can only reiterate that, yeah, and I will, in response to the white van, that is further down the road at number 17. And the car is beyond that, so you can have 10 cars down that road at any one time when those food vans are there. And that, you know, there is an issue with parking. There is an issue it does cause, and it is, like I say, it's safety issues for all on that road.
okay. Thank you very much.
Chair, the only other possibility, and I've just been scribbling between my client, is Miss Elliott said that the biggest issue midweek was later on, during rush hour, during the rush hour period. An alternative option may be to curtail the start time midweek for the vans so that they started to later at times such as 6 p.m.
6 p.m. still rush hour.
Yeah, it's a rush hour in general.
But you know, in the spirit of cooperation and sort of trying to find.
We'll consider that, but thank you for offering that as a way forward. Thank you.
Yeah.
So I've got that with us. Thank you. Just to check, do you feel you've had a fair hearing today?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Do you feel you've had a fair hearing today?
I think so, albeit nervous and a
you.
little bit
Yes.
out of our depths, like bunnies in headlights.
Thank you for coming. Well done. So I have one question for the licensing officer, if I may. Has environmental health received any complaints regarding any of the operations?
I wouldn't have any data on environmental health, unfortunately, so
And they haven't provided a submission?
that we've had no representation.
Fine, okay, thank you. So we'll now take our time to make a decision on this. We'll retire, well, you would ask you to leave, please. Please take it, you're leaving. And if you could wait in the reception area, or, you know, it might take us a little while, so feel free to pop over to Waitrose and grab a sandwich.
It won't be too long.
No, I don't. And Darius will come out and bring you back in when we're ready to announce our decision.
I think we may need to check our parking tickets.
Yes, the machines aren't working, so that might take up most of your Have we said it down?
Oh,
Not received. She must go to a separate, little legal and democratic folder. No, can I use this one? Oh, no, okay.
That was a joke.
Yeah. Slight like that. Thank you all very much for your time today. I would now like to announce, the decision.
Sorry,
Sorry.
very briefly, let me just, okay, so go ahead.
Yes,
Yeah.
no, may I? Yes. The panel has convened and we have decided to grant the street trading licence to the Greyhound Whitchurch, subject to the standard street trading consent condition and the additional following conditions. Between the hours of 12 midday and 9 p.m, the street trader shall only operate for a maximum of 5 hours. The consent will only be used for a maximum of 4 days per week. The annual usage or during the licence period, will not exceed 200 days per consent. The traders will provide an additional bin for use by customers. At the end of trading, the traders will undertake a litter sweep of the immediate vicinity of the street trading space. Appropriate cleaning of any cooking solution deposits to be undertaken at the end of each street trading period, or the use of drip trays. All traders are to operate at the site, no idling. Generators must be silent, and to provide information about the vendors, date of operation and hours of operation to the council on request. Sorry, just to clarify, because you said 5 hours of operating, I don't know if it was 5 hours trading, but I thought we changed the wording to trading instead of.
We just wanted to change the word to trading to ensure that setup time wasn't
Included in that 5
Included
hours,
in
because
your
we
5
understand the
hours.
setup and cool down time is a
That-
little bit
yeah.
different to the actual trading.
Yeah,
that will be,
trying to be fair.
that will be in the written conditions.
Yeah.
when we come to you. Secondly, the panel has granted the street trading licence to the Red Line at Chinner, subject to the standard street trading consent conditions and the additional following conditions. Between the hours of 12 midday and 9 p.m, the street trader shall operate for a maximum of 5 hours. The consent shall only be used for a maximum of 4 days per week, save for bank holiday weeks, which will only be used for a maximum of 4 days. The annual usage will not exceed 180 days per consent. The traders will provide an additional bin for use by customers. At the end of trading, the traders will undertake a litter sweep of the immediate vicinity of the street trading space. All traders are to operate at the site. Appropriate cleaning of cooking solution deposits to be undertaken at the end of each trading period, and or the use of drip trays. No idling. Generators must be silent, and provide the information about the vendor, date of operation and hours of operation to the council if requested. Thirdly, the panel grants the street trading licence to the Cross Keys, Wallingford, subject to the standard street trading consent conditions and the additional following conditions. Between the hours of 12 midday and 9 p.m, the street trader shall operate for a maximum of 5 hours. The consent will only be used for a maximum of 4 days per week. The annual usage will not exceed 200 days per consent. The traders will provide an additional bin for use by customers. At the end of trading, traders will undertake a litter sweep of the immediate vicinity. Traders are to operate at the site. Appropriate cleaning of any cooking solution deposits to be undertaken at the end of each period, and or the use of drip trays. No idling. Generators must be silent, and to provide information about the name of vendor, date of operation and hours of operation to the council on request. We'll be providing you with a written decision notice as well, which will be coming out in the coming days. Did you have any further questions?
Thank you.
So as you probably know, any person unhappy with the panel's decision today may make an application to the High Court for a judicial review of the decision. And before I formally close the meeting, are there any outstanding questions for myself or for the officers? No, thank you. Now the meeting is now closed at 1:30.